Hi, joining me today is Ivan Lilikist, founder and CEO of Moralis. Welcome.
Thanks.
To kick it off, I'll ask you a few questions about yourself. The first question is, when and how did you first get into crypto?
Yeah, so I heard about crypto at the peak of 2013 bull market when Bitcoin was approximately $1,000 and it went to 1.1K. And as always, when the Bitcoin is going up a lot, there's a lot of hype in the media, in social media, in newspapers, and that's when I first heard about it. And at that point, I was a full-time developer and still studying. And for me, as a developer, this was an interesting proposition that you can have money online that you cannot copy-paste. So that was what attracted me to learn how it works. How can you have a currency online? At that point, I also heard that it's backed by electricity. Someone told me it's a money online backed by electricity. I thought it was super cool. So as a tech person, this was a very interesting technology and then a whole rabbit hole to discover.
Cool. What's the most bizarre or craziest thing that you've ever done or experienced in crypto?
Well, I mean, in crypto, you experience bizarre things all the time. That's why it's so fun. Some of them are bizarre. I mean, some of them are so bizarre that it can only happen in crypto. Everything from all of the different successes we have and how fast this industry grows, but also when it comes to the biggest failures where I think it's quite bizarre that in this industry we can say, $100 million lost, and then in a hack, and then you can just write a tweet, we will try better next time. And it happens almost all the time. The DeFi projects are hacked, and they're like, we're gonna pick ourselves up. Thank you everyone for all the great support in the community, and then you can sing as normal. So it is this bizarre wild west, but that's also what I love about it, that we are exploring new tech, new concepts, new ways of building applications and finance. And that's also why it's so great to be a developer in Web3, because it's like a sandbox, we call it, that you can try whatever you want. In programming, a sandbox is an environment where you can build and try different things and test it out. And that's exactly what crypto is, that if you are a dev, you can build anything. You can program money, you can decide yourself what the assets are doing, how they will be sent, what your code will do with the assets, and what the user and how the user will interact. So I think from a development standpoint, this is the most exciting industry to be in.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What's your biggest joy and your biggest disappointment related to crypto?
Well, it is disappointing that many people across the world are still not fully understanding what crypto is. For example, where I'm from in Sweden, we have a lot of people still believing that crypto is a scam, that it's only for illegal activities and so on and so forth. And we've been here already for 10 years, so it is a bit disappointing to still hear that now and then, that it's still some industry which is weird and sometimes people don't even understand why we exist. So that is still a bit disappointing, but at the same time, it's also a good opportunity, because when the world still doesn't understand technology or an industry, it means that there is opportunity. Because if you look at Apple or Google, everyone knows that they're great. That's why they're valued in the trillions almost. So that's a very known industry which is very appreciated. But crypto is still underappreciated. It's still up and coming. And so this disappointment is also good in reality, because it means that if you understand it and you're part of this industry, you have a lot of opportunity that most people don't know about, which means that there's arbitrage. There's arbitrage in knowledge, that you know something that others don't. You know that this is going to be big, so it is time to get involved. It's time to invest, to build, and be part of crypto.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Now let's change gears a bit and talk about your projects. Moralis is a platform that powers decentralized applications, correct? What was the reason for you to basically launch it back in 2020?
Yeah, so Moralis is a platform for developers. So if you want to build something, you can use Moralis to build it quicker. If you are a Web2 developer and you come into Web3, you can use Moralis and you can build wallets, exchanges, you can build NFT applications, all kinds of things with the simplicity of Web2. So there's no extra knowledge required from you to learn in terms of tech stack, in terms of SDKs, in terms of API. It's very similar to how you build a web server, or very similar to how you build a normal website. And we started with this idea last year, and it's been growing very, very quickly. And currently we are powering some of the biggest applications. For example, MetaMask is using our data for NFTs, especially because NFTs, it's a very difficult tech to work with. It's a lot of different standards, a lot of different metadata standards, and so on and so forth. So this space of collecting data and serving it to developers is something that we're very excited about, because there are so many different blockchains, so many layer 2 solutions. Some blockchains are EVM compatible, some are not, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. And as a developer, it's very important to be able to reach the users on all of the different chains. Most applications today are cross-chain, and the complexity that comes with this is enormous. Just to log in the user and show all their assets from different chains is very difficult. With Moralis, it's a few lines of code. So this is the problem that we're solving, that you want to build quickly, but it's difficult when there are many chains to collect all data about your users, to log in users across chains, and so on and so forth. And that's been a very quick journey for us already. We've gone from 0 to over 100,000 devs using us. But at the same time, it's also only the beginning, because there are so many chains, so many things to do still. And this is what I love about crypto as well, that we're shaping this industry. Just by being in this industry, we're shaping it. We are making it happen. So that's another thing why it's so great to be in crypto, that it's not that we're just using some existing technology. We're actually creating something from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Moralis' website says that the project bridges Web 2 and Web 3. Could you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, exactly. So what we mean by that is that if you are a Web 2 developer, you can easily start in Web 3. And this means a lot for projects, because if you are a project, you can hire Web 2 developers, and using Moralis, you can be productive in Web 3. You can build Web 3 applications. And if you are a developer, of course, you want to enter Web 3, you want to do it in the fastest way possible. You don't want to spend 8 months learning the entire Web 3 tech stack just to get started. With Moralis, you get started instantly. So this is the bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. The fact that Web 2 and Web 3 are right now merging, because a lot of applications, you look at, for example, Meta or Facebook or Instagram, what Meta is doing there, or with Twitter, it is Web 2 together with Web 3, because now we have NFTs in all of the different applications. Soon, probably, a lot of applications will also integrate protocols like 1inch and others for trading and liquidity. So Web 2 is merging with Web 3, and our goal is to make this merging as smooth as possible. And who will do this merge is devs. So devs need to be able to do this in the simplest way possible. So that's what Moralis is aiding.
Mm-hmm. Well, basically, my next question is about your future plans. Do you plan to introduce more products, or maybe integrate more chains? What are you planning to do?
Yeah, so definitely more chains. That's something that we're seeing all the time, that chains are growing and new chains are coming, and developers want to be everywhere. They don't want to miss users, because if you don't have a big chain or a successful chain, you're missing out on a lot of users. And let's say you're building a game, you want your users to take their NFTs from all different chains into your game. So that's definitely important. Then also a lot when it comes to identity. So we have all of these data tools, but then it's important to connect it to an identity. So when you log in and you're a developer, let's say you want to accept users into your app, your user logs in, we connect all of the data into the identities. So that's something that we still have to expand a lot on. And then finally, more interesting and smart insights about the data. So we are a very data-focused company, and we can do so much more when it comes to, for example, giving insights about which coins are getting traction because whales are buying them, or whales are adding liquidity, or which new NFT collections are getting big because you do see prominent, successful wallets that have done good deals in the past and traded in the past on chain that we can see are now getting into it. So that's the next step for us to add more insights, more smart data, so we can give our clients more things that they can give their users when it comes to insights. And with these insights, you can really engage your users. So if you're building a wallet, if you're building a mobile app, something with crypto, if you can give your users insights, what I just discussed, they're gonna find your app more engaging and interesting. So that's our goal. Most of our clients that have become big, they've done something user-facing, whether it's wallets or apps or portfolio managers or NFT marketplaces or games, and that's where it's important to keep the user interested, keep the user engaged, and that's also where we're heading with more smarter insights.
Now let's segue to more general questions about the crypto space. Apparently, we are living through a crypto winter. Of course, it's impossible to predict when it will end, and I won't ask you to try to do that, but my question is, what impact is this crypto winter having on the crypto space, on development activity, and probably some other aspects?
Yeah, so it has a big impact on the retail space. You see NFT volumes being down by 95%. So it's a massive impact on everything related to trading, to investing, to speculating, and that's undeniable. And when it comes to real projects building, we don't see a big change there because as a development platform, we're also noticing a decline in the small hobby developers finding us and experimenting because it's not a hype, crypto is not as hot, so not as many devs just Google to find out about crypto. But at the same time, we're seeing the bigger projects grow bigger and the bigger projects expanding. So I think that in this industry, we have a lot of capital that has been raised over the past few years. And that capital is now being deployed, applications are built, and use cases are built. So I don't think that it impacts a lot, especially because people have capital, projects have capital. We're not in a position where many projects are dying because of lack of capital. And that's why I'm not too worried, but of course, you gotta work harder now for the results. So you may not die and run out of capital, but to achieve your metrics when it comes to active users or revenue, whatever metrics you have, that's more difficult now. And most projects that are in the space, they need to figure out a sustainable model in this bearish years, so that when the market returns and users return, that you have a sustainable model, because then you don't have any excuse to why your numbers don't check out. Today, many projects have an excuse. I mean, you just look at the NFT volumes or crypto activity in general. Everyone now has an excuse why their numbers don't check out or not as good as they would like. But when the crypto market returns, that's when your numbers gotta be good. And now is the time to ensure that.
You've just mentioned that NFTs are basically far from their peak levels.
Yes.
But what do you think is going to happen to NFTs in the future? I've heard opinions that probably NFTs are going to drive the next bull run. What do you think about that? And also, what do you think about NFTs' possible utilities going forward?
Yeah, so gaming is the biggest entertainment industry in the world. So if NFTs can find the use case there, it's very possible that they are going to drive the new wave of adoption. But my concern is mainly about the fact that currently NFTs and gaming NFTs in particular, they're making them in a way which doesn't really onboard people into Web3. And I think that's what we're missing now, that there are games that just have NFTs, Web3 native NFTs, which means that it's very difficult to use them. You gotta have a wallet, you gotta have pay for transaction fees, and so on and so forth. And that doesn't really work. But on the other hand, you have games that totally hide all Web3. And the user doesn't even notice Web3. And I don't think that works either, because then the user doesn't really get into Web3. They don't really start becoming a Web3 native. They don't trade, they don't use DEXs, they don't really understand what they're doing, which also means that they cannot really be a big spender. I mean, the real big spenders in Web3 when it comes to trading or just interacting with Web3 is people that are Web3 natives, that have their own wallet, they have traded, they have bought, they have invested. I mean, those are the valuable clients of any protocol or valuable users of any app or any protocol. So I think the key to NFT success is that the NFT is gonna be through gaming, I think, and games have to take the users and make them crypto natives, Web3 natives. That's going to be key, because otherwise we're gonna have silos in the NFT space. So you see, for example, a silo in projects like this NBA project, let's say, which is massive, but they're totally disconnected from Web3. NBA Top Shots. They're totally disconnected. They don't even know they have NFTs because they pay with a credit card. They see the NFT in their portfolio, and that's it. And then there's no bridge. So I think we gotta bridge that to make NFTs mainstream and also interesting from a Web3 perspective. And then whether it will drive the new bull run, I think it's very possible. But at the same time, there are so many other great things that may drive it. It can be DeFi, it can be just the fact that you have economies not doing that well and currencies collapsing across the world that people look at crypto more. So we have so many ways to go up for many different reasons. And I don't think that one specific sector is going to drive it, but it's probably going to take a few years before we return.
What do you think about anonymity in crypto? Should a crypto be anonymous or should it not? Because opinions differ. Some argue that anonymity in crypto is bad because it leads to nefarious activities, and other people argue that it's crypto should be anonymous because there are people who are living under oppressive regimes who should be able to use it. What's your take?
Yeah, so anonymity, it depends on how it's implemented. So if it is on the base protocol level, I think that could work because then it's part of the protocol, which means that you cannot really censor it. It's part of the protocol. There's no one running it. That's why Monero works so well through all these years. But anonymity on an app level, like for example what we saw with Tornado Cash, that clearly is not a good way because there you have an app developer that can be targeted. So that's exactly what we saw with Tornado Cash. So that's why I don't think that anonymity, which is not part of the core protocol, makes sense. And this is also what we've seen with the recent developments in Tornado. Currently, there are a few projects doing interesting things. For example, the Secret Network, they do it in a very good way where it's privacy in ways that actually regulators should like. Because if you look at the EU, for example, we have GDPR. It's so heavy privacy focused in general, and data protection regulation. There's so much. So privacy is actually something that is appreciated. Regulators should, in theory, at least like privacy. There is bank privacy. There is all kinds of privacy regulations in both finance and non-finance. So that's why it's interesting what Secret Network is doing, because they have privacy by default, but if you want, you can also reveal your transactions if you have a specific key. So you can be fully transparent to your auditor, to your tax authorities, to someone else that you require transparency for, but publicly you're anonymous. So something like that I think is very good, that you can both be private and not private. And that has to be on the protocol level. Where it's by default. It's not something that the developer decides to add to their app, because then no developer will add it to their app because it's a risk. But if it's part of the protocol, by default, everyone gets it. It's part, let's say, of Ethereum or Bitcoin in the future. That's the way to do it. And then you also got to ensure it's easy to show to your auditor or someone else and prove what you've done.
You just mentioned regulators. What's your vision of an ideal regulation for crypto?
Crypto is already very regulated in many regards. So many people say that it's not regulated, but it is regulated. We have normal regulation when it comes to scamming. If you scam using crypto, it's still a scam, and you're still responsible for it. So it is very regulated already, but I think we should look at regulation that works right now. You have Dubai, you have Switzerland, you have Estonia trying, all of these progressive countries that are trying to set clarity. I think they've done a good job. And clarity is important, because if you don't have clarity, then no one will do anything, because the risks are enormous and you don't know really where you stand. So some regulatory clarity is important. And it's important to do it in a way which inspires people to build and to move to the country and to invest and to have their teams there. So I think what Dubai is doing is very interesting, and Switzerland in different regions. When it comes to the US, hopefully it's going to play out in a good way. And the most important thing in the US now is that you don't kill DeFi, because there are many different proposals. And just recently we saw some discussions that, all right, maybe DeFi should be regulated on the front-end level. So if you have a website, for example, that it means, okay, you need KYC everyone who uses your website, which is just a front end for the DeFi protocol. I mean, that would be horrible because it would not solve a lot. It will not actually solve any problems because the hackers or whoever wants to use it without the front end, they can still do it. So you really don't protect access to the protocol. But you remove all the normal users who don't know how to go and interact with smart contracts directly, which are mostly normal users. And all of the people doing illegal activities, they will find a way to circumvent the front end or do another front end. So I don't like that discussion. I think that doesn't make sense. And I think what makes sense is just use the normal regulations you have right now in many regards and just apply it to crypto. Because we have regulation for scams, we have regulation for investment. I mean, there are many regulations already. And I don't think we should have a lot new regulation necessarily, but we should clarify what everything means in crypto. What is the security token? What is the utility token? Where do you draw the line? And so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about DAOs? Could they have real world use cases?
Yeah, so there are many different definitions of DAOs. One way to define a DAO is that it's a normal company, but that does business on chain. You have instead of having a bank account, you have a wallet. Instead of having traditional investments in equity, you have investments also in equity, but equity now is tokenized, and you can see everything on chain. So that's one definition of DAO I heard, and I think that one makes perfect sense because then it means that all the payment infrastructure, all the cap tables, all the stocks, all the equity, that has exactly the same standard in all countries, in all companies. And I think that makes perfect sense. That let's say that I want to invest in a startup, I can just look up their ownership on chain. And I don't need to go through their agreements and their cap table, which looks totally different in different countries. And having this one standard of doing things in the corporate world makes sense. Across countries, across continents, you have one standard of doing finance, of doing on-chain accounts, of doing equity. I think that makes perfect sense. And then that's one way of defining DAO. And basically it's a normal company, but does a lot of business on chain. And another way of defining a DAO is that it's somehow, this movement online, which is, it's not a company, it's not really registered. It's like anonymous people doing something and then they generating some profit and then distributing it. I think in the future it's very possible that the world works like that, but it's just currently not very compatible with how the non-crypto world works. So if you, let's say, you come together and you organize, that's by definition a company that should be registered. It is at least that in many European jurisdictions, probably in the US as well, that if you come together like an enterprise and you do something, I mean, by law, you should register that. And then the question is, of course, how do you enforce it? How do you track it? And so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, in my head, it doesn't make sense because let's say I'm part of a DAO and I generate income from the DAO. I mean, that income, let's say I want to buy a house, I want to buy a car. The authorities will instantly ask, where did you get the money from? Is that salary or what is it? The DAO? Why don't you pay social taxes? So that's why that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But it could be interesting as a future, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years ahead, that maybe it could be possible to organize humans in this fashion, that we can organize global efforts and come together and do different things online, and maybe, because it's also interesting to think what an LLC has done for humanity, because before companies, you couldn't really come together. You were a peasant working in the farmland for your nobleman or where you were working. And then LLCs came, and now we can organize. And that, of course, propelled humanity, because now everyone has their ideas, has their different businesses, enterprises, they want to make some money. And when you allow people to do that, then suddenly you have this explosion in business, in living standards, in new inventions. So, I mean, that has unlocked a lot for humanity. And an interesting thought is, okay, in the future, what if we can do this, but on a global level? Because LLCs today are still very local and very difficult to hire people across the world. It's a lot of overhead. But what if we remove this overhead? How much more productivity will humanity gain? And how will that compound over years? That's very interesting. Currently, it's not very compatible, but it's an interesting idea to keep in mind. So long term, I'm also bullish on this other more abstract definition of a DAO.
Cool. Thank you, Ivan.
Thanks.
You.